when more recruiting happens with AI, there will be more cheaters too. What do you think about it?
Totally.
When we're hiring a software engineer in India, they're often only applying to a few dozen jobs. Marketed are 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week.
A student gets into a big school like Harvard, GeorgeTown. Is that to you? You guys really recommend dropping out?
Submitted the leave of absence paperwork to Harvard, and I'm just like, I'm doing it. I'm going to New York.
Oh, because forgiveness is better than permission.
Of course.
In 3 months, coding will be 90% done by LLMs, and in 12 months, 100%. Do you agree with this future? Today, we are in the headquarters of fastest growing AI company in the world, which reached 100 million ARR in less than 1 year, in around 11 months. Mercor AI is now valued $2 billion. We're going to see the future of hiring, saving hours of time for you to get hired, so you have to interview at one place, and hours of time saved for recruiters. Mercor AI is an idea that is very difficult to come up with because, like as Steve Jobs mentioned, think different. From 1900s to 2000s, we have come up with great solutions to problems like cancer. Innovation meant thinking and creating something out of the world, for example, going to space or building something to cure cancer. But right now in Bay Area, it is 90% B2B SaaS startups. Mm-hmm. But thinking something that revolutionary in improving how we recruit people. You guys have done more than 100,000 interviews with this AI-powered recruiting platform. For human being in 1 year to do it, it would require 10,000 plus HR, which you've done with AI. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. No one can imagine that. So how did you come up with this fascinating idea?
Thanks so much for coming. I have watched a bunch of your episodes, and so I'm a big fan. Growing up in the Bay Area, I specifically grew up in Menlo Park, of course, the hub of so many of the largest, most prominent companies in the world. And I met my co-founders, Adarsh and Surya, in San Jose when we were in high school. And it was this very interesting feeling because we were around so much innovation and people building startups left and right, and everyone was in tech. But we didn't fully realize that and appreciate that until we went elsewhere, right? Until we went to the East Coast for college and we saw that, like, wow, this is this incredible microcosm of innovation that we were sort of immersed in from a very young age.
So like the moment you went to Georgetown University, Surya and Adarsh went to Harvard.
Well, so Surya was my roommate at Georgetown, and then Adarsh was at Harvard.
So, Surya was with you at Georgetown and Adarsh at Harvard. So you guys used to visit each other, in different cities, and you guys realize how important Bay Area is for the world. Mm-hmm. So what clicked you in the university that, you should go back?
Oh, in so far as coming back to the Bay, dropping out of school, all of that, I think the largest thing was that it's the best time in the world to start a company, right? Like there's so much that's possible with how capable LLMs are and the rate of improvement in the foundation models that it felt like sacrificing that opportunity and like all that was possible to spend more time in class or partying with friends didn't make as much sense anymore. And so it was really just being drawn more so by the innovation and AI and LLMs more so than the specific geography, but of course it happens to all be happening at the heart of San Francisco.
So how did you come up with this fascinating idea?
Yeah, well, so I think we were very obsessed with ChatGPT when we started using it, right? And at the time, it wasn't capable of doing a lot of the things that we need to do now in reviewing resumes, just like how a human would go about doing it, conducting interviews and deciding who to hire. But we had a lot of confidence as we saw GPT-4 and this like rapid pace of innovation that all of these human processes would be possible to be done with LLMs. And so that was what caused us to take the leap of faith in that, we wanted to dedicate a huge chunk of our lives to building this company. And so far it's coming along pretty well.
Now we have the CTO of Mercor, Adarsh. Thank you for having us again. Let's go. We were talking about dropping out. Dropping out from college sounds way easy than it is. Someone from Indian background, it's extremely harder because education is way more important. So for both of you, how was the decision like?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. It was an interesting decision because my mom is also a professor. So she's pretty much as bought into academia as you can get. I had just gone into Harvard and we were all super excited. And then within 2 years, I was saying that I wanted to drop out. Even though things were going amazing at Harvard, we hadn't raised in funding. And it was just Brendan, Surrey, and I in this like small Palo Alto office.
But we had the $1 million revenue run
We
rate.
did have the $1 million run rate.
And we'd profited $80K at the end of the summer after paying ourselves. So the business was making progress, but we didn't have the sort of external funding and validation at that point.
Yeah. So, you know, it was a combination of all those things that made it pretty difficult to just tell my parents that I wanted to completely withdraw from my degree program.
Even with a profitable business, which has profit more than a college degree tuition fee, if you think about it, even then.
Yep. So I have actually a pretty funny story that's similar to Brendan, which is I initially asked them for permission, and I don't blame them at all for being skeptical. And then like 2 weeks later, I just told them that I'd done it. Like I had like submitted the leave of absence paperwork to Harvard, and I'm just like, I'm doing it. I'm going to New York. And they came to terms with it pretty quickly.
Oh, because forgiveness is better than permission.
Of course.
How about you? How was the decision like?
Yeah, I didn't tell my parents before doing it. I sort of just stopped going to finals and really attending classes. And I knew what I wanted to do a lot earlier on. And so I had my mind made up.
You guys were born and raised in Bay Area. What skill you would say you have that by living in Bay Area or because of your upbringing have made you who you are today?
I would say I was exposed to engineering from a very, very early age, right? There's a huge density of engineering talent in the Bay Area. My dad worked in tech as well, and he was always sort of telling me about all these different things, and we build all these different things together. So for me, a huge component of it was being exposed to tech, engineering, and startups since the day I was born.
Yeah, I think for me, it was really being around startups and this like culture of building things and selling things, and especially in Menlo Park, right? I mean, it's where Facebook was, of course, set up their first headquarters. The Google garage was in Menlo Park, as well as Tesla, the founding meeting of OpenAI. And it's this little 40,000 person town, right? Where like all of this incredible innovation was coming from. And so just the fact of like seeing that stuff was possible, right? And seeing like the density of talent in that place was really informative. Because I think like, as I think through the journey of Mercor, some of the most motivating things are sort of like the times when you see other people that are on an exciting journey and that they're not that different from all of us, right? And that you can be like those people and you can accomplish those extraordinary things if you realize that it's possible and set your mind to it.
I want to talk about your school journey, like growing up in Bay Area. Like how can you connect the dots between founder mindset, debating, and becoming a founder?
Yeah. So it's pretty interesting because I view debate as very similar to founding in a lot of ways. So I was debate partners with my other co-founder, Surya. And there it was very, very similar in the sense that we had 50-50 equity in each other's success, right? We'd go through these emotional highs and lows depending on the level at which we're competing at, especially in the later rounds of these like national tournaments. And then also there's this like constant feedback loop of whether you won or lost. So the combination of all of those things really, really trained us well to be founders.
Yeah, of course. So when I was growing up, I was never super excited by school, and I was always founding companies in one form or another. Like I loved selling donuts in my donut business in 8th grade. I went through a phase of using software to resell sneakers and starting this AWS consultancy throughout high school. But I met my co-founders, Adarsh and Surya, on the debate team, where they were incredible at debates. So they were the first team in history to win all 3 of the primary national tournaments in the most competitive event, policy debate. And so some refer to as the winningest debate team of all time. And I am dyslexic, so I wasn't very good at debate, but I always loved building companies. And so I did a little bit of debate, but I think our interests really converged in high school of how can we ensure that we're, applying a lot of the skills that we've built up throughout high school to ultimately build really exciting companies.
I remember Adarsh mentioning in his podcast that he barely went to classes.
Mm-hmm.
So he was physically at school and you were also physically at school, but behind the scene, you were always missing building stuff. How was it like?
Yeah, I think it was that I found that I'm never like a very disciplined person, and that when I have to do something like school or going to classes, I'm not like great at holding myself accountable to doing that. But what I am is very like obsessive, right? When I get excited about something that I know has a potential to really do an incredible thing in the world, I can't help but spend all of my time on that, right? And I think we had that pull with Mercor, right? If it wasn't our holding ourselves accountable to how do we ship the next feature and how do we get the next customer contract, it was much more that we were very innately driven to do that and excited about what the company could become.
So the idea came in your college dorm room. Like, can you share the dorm stories? Like,
Yeah.
I was fascinated by the story from others' podcast and your podcast that you guys used to stay in the dorm, work at night, and then like when the roommate came back, he used to wake you up and used to start working together.
Yeah, Artemis, who's somewhere here in the office, I would sleep in his bed because he went to bed at 8 a.m. and so I had to leave for a flight. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. We would build a lot of projects for fun. And so in the early days, we were just doing software contracting where we charge our friends a few $1,000s to build a website. We'd hire engineers from the IITs and various other universities as well to help with building websites and various forms of web apps. And then our friends who are building their own companies asked if they could hire talent through us because they were amazed that we had access to all of these incredibly talented people and they wanted to hire them. And so the business model that we charge a certain amount a week to our friends, these early stage startups, and then we take a fee on that and pay the rest to talent in India, particularly software engineers that we were hiring. And we hustled a lot and scaled up the business from there to ultimately automate all of the processes that we were doing manually.
So 1 million ARR without raising a single dollar, just by helping your friends at GeorgeTown and Harvard. They were building their software companies to help them scale. You just automated this process. And 1 million ARR in 1 year, it's just unbelievable to imagine. Like, and here we want to understand scalability. Like, how companies scale when they are starting up versus now. It's a fascinating problem. I want to understand how you scale. So you mentioned network effect and data flywheel effect. So network effect like DoorDash, Airbnb by word of mouth, and data flywheel by consulting. So can you break down these ways, how you scaled then and now how you scale now?
Absolutely. So there's two really important things that we focus on as a business. The first is building up our marketplace, right? Where we have a lot of companies that are hiring through us and we have a lot of applicants that are coming to us looking for jobs. And so we focus on how do we build up the supply side of the marketplace, all of the candidates. And it has a lot of those network effects similar to an Uber or Airbnb, as you mentioned. And then the second thing that we focus a lot on is how do we learn from all the feedback of our customers of who's performing well and who's not performing well to make better predictions around who we should be hiring for our customers, right? So that's a data flywheel, similar to how Google search learns from all of the search queries that people are making and what links they're clicking on, similar to how Tesla learns from all this data of what's happening on the road. We learn from all of our users about what's going well, what's not going well, and then incorporate those insights into our model to make better predictions in the future.
But what about distribution here? Because distribution cannot just happen with those two effects.
Yeah.
You need to leverage your Twitter. You need to leverage much more beyond that. So how do you target that problem?
Totally. Well, so I think there's distribution on the supply side, right? Where we might post on LinkedIn. We have a lot of referrals where we hire thousands of people and ask them for referrals of their smartest friends to send them to the platform so that we can hire them. And then the other side of it is distribution on the demand side, where we work, of course, with most of the big tech companies in the US. And what it's really come down to for them is showing that we have the best product and the best talent, right? Them seeing the results of how high caliber the people that we're hiring has been like the best sales proposal that we could make to them. In fact, so much so that we have no one in the company in sales or marketing. 100% of our headcount is focused on how do we create value for customers. And it's just been customers coming to us and growing contracts because we focus so much on doing a good job for them.
Fascinating. So if you want to visualize the future to the audience, like if with Mercor, if they can imagine like in next 3 years or even next, like how you're growing 50% every month. So if we can help them imagine what I see after talking to you all, future would be a candidate would have to do interview and apply at one place. They would be matched with hundreds of companies, possibly, and then they can recruit you with your interview performance at one place, a centralized system. So how would you describe, if I describe it this way?
Absolutely. I think about it as one global unified platform that facilitates all knowledge work transactions that every candidate applies to and every company hires from. Of course, using AI and LLMs to gain this understanding of who's good at what and how does that translate into how they'll perform on a job.
I have seen my friends getting hired through Mercor. They get fascinated by how in-depth questions you ask them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they were blown away that AI is asking in-depth about them. So how did we reach here? Because let me tell you what I see in friends, I see that if you want to hire someone or if you want to have a good friend, you can categorize in three ways: givers, takers, or matchers. Givers, they want to give as much value as much possible to you. Matchers, which will give you value and expect at the same time somewhere around the line. And takers, who just want to take something out of you, take value out of you.
Mm-hmm.
And we want maximum givers and matchers in workplace and as friends. So how do you think about that?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of those interpersonal skills and attributes of who cares about everyone around them, who wants to, make sure that they leave a good impression on everyone, are important things to measure. And so we ask about a lot of these dynamic things of seeing, how passionate is someone about the kinds of things that they're working on, and, what are all of these different nuanced attributes that actually go into whether someone's going to perform well on a job.
But how do you measure that? With AI, you can ask questions about their resume.
Yeah.
But it's really hard. In this hire fast, fire fast culture, most companies say that they can only figure out if a candidate is good in the first 2 weeks. They do a trial period and they're like, oh, if the candidate can perform well in 2 weeks, we want them. So is there a way you can figure out their bonding with the company they're joining, how good they will be performing? How do you understand that using
AI? So this is one of the largest differentiations behind our product, which is that we ground everything in performance data. So all of our customers give us performance data on how everyone is doing on jobs. And then we use that as our eval set to see what are the kinds of resumes, the kinds of interviews, the kinds of online profiles and GitHubs that make someone likely to perform well. And obviously, it's a very hard problem to solve. It's incredibly challenging to know who's going to be the top performer in a company. But through collecting the right data, asking the right questions during interviews, and being very dynamic and in-depth, we're starting to make a lot of headway. And the models are already significantly better than humans at predicting job performance.
Got it. So you're saying the causations and correlations between GitHub profile, their past performance, their projects. So you connect the dots in a way. Can you give an example? Let's say someone has never coded beyond college. They don't have a GitHub profile. They don't have a LinkedIn profile. How would you assess this person could be good at work?
Yeah, so an example is we might have an AI interview for system design where we ask them to screen share and we send them a prompt for a project that they should build on the call. And then they'll screen share, they'll start typing the answer to the system design question on GitHub. The interviewer will read their screen, be able to comment on their screen, and ultimately come to a conclusion for how well did they solve that problem. And so there's all sorts of creative, really cool assessments that people are able to take that ultimately go into how we make the best prediction possible about how they're going to perform.
So you're revolutionizing how recruitment should happen at the same time building an AI-powered platform. So you're doing not just solving one problem, you're also fixing the recruitment process because it's currently broken with just lead code and with just data structures and algorithms being targeted, not your project building and creativity being targeted.
Absolutely. I think that it really comes down to two inefficiencies in the market, right? The first is what you said about how all these assessments and recruitment are broken. Lead code is not that predictive of how well someone is doing. A lot of the human interviews are very vibes-based. They're not actually tied to the outcomes that people ultimately care about. But I think the second issue with labor markets is around fragmentation, in that when we're hiring a software engineer in India, they're often only applying to a few dozen jobs. And we're only considering a fraction of a percent of people in the world, right? Because all of that matching process is historically solved manually, where people are manually reviewing every resume, manually conducting every interview, and manually figuring out who to hire. But when you're able to build software and automated systems that can solve that matching process to review resumes, conduct interviews, and decide who to hire at, in a very scalable way, it makes way for this global unified labor market that every candidate applies to and every company hires from.
Got it. So it's like a centralized place, you're saying, that where like a person, let's say I'm a user, I want to apply for software engineering jobs right now. I have to go to Workday. On Workday as well, I have to manually apply for a single job position.
That's very painful.
On LinkedIn, I go to LinkedIn. One by one, every single job position possible, I apply. Sometimes I have to apply on LinkedIn plus their official landing page, let's say Microsoft.com, Google.com. It's so overwhelming. So you're saying all can happen in one place.
Exactly. And so we're hiring for most of the big tech companies in the US. We are hiring many thousands of people every month. And it's one unified application where sometimes there's different like subcomponents that people need to submit for a specific opportunity, but we consider all of their interviews when deciding to extend them a job offer.
So like if you understood the candidate's coding abilities, why make them repeat the interview at 10 companies? Why not keep it at one place?
Exactly.
Now, how does Mercor AI work? Like people talk badly about rappers, but we want to talk about that rappers now have the biggest leverage in the world. So how does it work? What models you use? I heard you use OpenAI models. How does it work behind the scenes?
Yeah, of course. So we do use a lot of OpenAI models, but also a variety of others, since there's so many processes throughout the entire company that LLMs are included in. And some of those models are off-the-shelf models where we're able to, just make an API call to figure out how well someone answered a particular question. But some of them are much more sophisticated, right? Where we need to post-train using all of our performance data of like, what are all of the different attributes that a foundation model isn't able to understand to actually predict the end job performance we care about. And it's through leveraging that proprietary data that we get back from all of our customers that we're able to generate all of these novel insights that drive a lot of the end value for our customers.
Okay, so it's like, can we call it like reinforcement learning, like fixing and getting the feedback out of your customers? So reinforcement learning, human feedback, as you get the feedback where the model is going like not performing up to the mark, you fine tune it that way.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a lot of new innovations around reinforcement fine tuning in particular, where you're able to create these reinforcement learning environments. You can let the model learn all of the things that cause someone to perform well on the job and then train on that. And so we're doing a lot of these training techniques to see how can we improve how accurately our models predicting the end job performance that, means not only that companies are having a good experience with a candidate, but also that candidates aren't having to churn through a bunch of these 2-week trials and they're able to find a job that they're really fulfilled by off the bat.
Brilliant. So for future, like as AI models are getting commoditized, AI agents will be coding for us. Do you see a future where Mercor will be recruiting AI agents for coding instead of just humans?
100%. Because I think in the next 5-10 years, as agents get better and better, there will be this like 70% that agents can do, and finding the right agent to do that 70% is a non-trivial problem. And then there's going to be this last 30% that a human should do, where there's obviously going to be all of the conventional questions around how do you match the right human to the right task and take it to the finish line, which is also where Mercor will come into the picture.
CEO of Anthropic, he said that in 3 months, coding will be 90% done by LLMs, and in 12 months, 100%. Do you agree with this future?
Maybe not 100%, because I think there's a lot of complexity, especially with building these large systems that sort of weave together and link together in interesting ways. But I do think a lot of coding will be automated by LLMs.
Because right now, like the charts we see, everyone in my audience, software engineers, they see the hiring for software engineering has gone at the lowest right now in the US. So as per data that you have from Mercor, what do you see the future of software engineering?
So I think software engineering as a category will look completely different in the sense that, the way that we think about it today, where a developer writes some Python code and then, pushes it, that will look very different in the sense that we'll be operating at much higher levels of abstraction, right? You will have a developer that's orchestrating a bunch of different AI agents to accomplish different outcomes. And the person who will succeed in engineering fields going forward will be the one that can effectively leverage all of those agents to accomplish the tasks as they want to.
what about the trajectory? Is it going up, or you think, because right now I wanted to tell that data science is the most popular major for UC Berkeley now from this year. The most common and the most popular major used to be for universities, computer science, which is changing.
Yeah, I think that there's so much demand for more software in the economy, right? We would build 100 or 1,000 times more software in a world where we make each software engineer much, much more effective. But the skills that are required from a great software engineer will certainly change over time, right? The models are really good at data structures and algorithms questions. And so we probably will index less on people that are able to solve those or similar problems of how do they write super clean code, and index a lot more on what are the engineers that have taste and understanding what are the products that are going to do well in markets. How can they leverage code gen tools to help ship features even faster, and all of these different things that go into shipping the end product that companies and users care about.
100%. Like, I agree that software growth could be there because when it becomes so easy to make software, everyone would want to create their own software and it'll keep growing. And here the important part comes is in AI-based recruiting, there is a biggest problem to solve, which is cheating. Right now, a lot of people do online interviews. I see a lot of young hackers creating ways to cheat. For example, there's an invisible chat window. I don't know if you see on Twitter. There's a guy from Colombia. He made an invisible chat window. When you share your screen, you can literally invisibly talk to the chat bot and it'll solve your coding problems on the screen, and you basically get it solved. So when more recruiting happens with AI, there will be more cheaters too. What do you think about it?
Totally. I was actually talking to a friend the other day at a large AI lab, and it was telling me that the project-based assessments that they send out, they require that nobody uses AI tools. And apparently 80% of the submissions were flagged by the algorithm as cheating. And those were just the flag submissions, right? So the actual number of cheating cases is likely even higher than that.
Really?
Yeah.
But this is unfair for people who prepare hard. Like I can tell you, like one of my friends, he was interviewing, he solved the problem, which was difficult, but he had done it like 3 times. So he solved it in 5 minutes because he was typing fast. The recruiter thought that must be a cheater and then flagged him. It's a very tough problem. How do you see, like some people say that they want to go back to the time where you do in-person whiteboard interview.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be much more important over time that you're assessing people properly. And you're totally right that like the online interviews are easier to cheat on, but there's all sorts of creative strategies that you can use to help make sure that people aren't able to cheat in an AI interview. For example, you could ask them questions about like their background, about things that aren't in the context of the model that they're trying to use to cheat. You could ask them a problem that's like really hard, such that the model's not able to solve it, but if the model has the correct answer, it's able to validate that they got the correct answer. And so there's all sorts of these techniques, and I think it'll always be this cat and mouse game, right? Of like the cheating tools get better, the assessments need to get better, and how do you stay at the cutting edge of that? With hopefully some, there will still be for a lot of roles some in-person interviews for things that you really want to be 100% certain that there's no cheating on.
I think there are going to be sort of some roles where you might want to do the in-person whiteboard interview. But one thing that we've thought a lot about is if the entire economy is going to move towards, embracing these AI tools, we should move towards a world where we assess people based on their ability to use all the tools at their disposal, including those AI tools, and judging them based on what they can produce with it.
So the future is that you judge a coder not by the coding abilities, how well they use AI.
Well, I mean, you could argue that those are both the same thing, right? A crucial part of coding in the next 10 years is going to be how you use AI and how you use the AI agents to accomplish the outcomes that you want.
So the future is judging them with multiple skills, not just like system design, not just algorithmic assessment, just beyond that. So you're going to continue to catch up with that game.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So there is, importance of maybe, testing people based on those fundamentals. But I think the really important thing to test is if people have all these tools available at their disposal that can make them much, much more productive, what can they do, right? And if in the real world, on the job, people will have those tools at their disposal, I think it's really, really important to reflect assessments to have assessments that reflect the real work. and the real work will involve AI going forward.
Excellent. Now, final segment, I want to think about beyond coding. For coding and software engineering jobs, it can be very well solved. But what about for managerial roles, manufacturing, small businesses? How can Mercor actually leverage those recruiting jobs as well?
Absolutely. So you're saying hiring people for managerial jobs or small businesses outside of coding?
Correct.
Actually, we're already doing a lot of this. Like,
Really?
we already hire people for all sorts of roles in the economy, ranging from lawyers to doctors, consultants, investment bankers. And the reason is that the foundational technology is incredibly generalizable, right? Like, we are automating the way that you would review a resume, that you would conduct an interview, and make a decision about who to hire. And all of the LLMs have really strong transfer learning, so that when we get good at that for software engineers, it makes us better at it for lawyers and doctors, and the converse. And so we have this really broad, generalizable platform that is one of the reasons we've been able to scale so quickly.
And what do you define a good hire? It's a broad question.
Yeah.
But if you have to understand, because you understand now, because you're solving the same problems.
Yeah. So one thing we've talked about Mercor doing is training models that predict how well someone will perform on a job. And what you're accurately identifying is that oftentimes half of the challenge is just figuring out what does it mean to perform well in the job, right? And sort of getting that data, interpreting that data from the end customer. And so that's one of our big focuses, right? Is like, how do our teams understand, like, what are the outcomes that customers care about? How do we measure that very effectively? And then how do we goal on that to make sure that our models are optimizing for the metrics that they care about, whether it be the amount of sales that an account executive is driving, or, the amount of successful tasks that a software engineer is completing.
What is the most difficult part doing that? Like, from outside, it seems really easy. People can call any AI startup right now as a rapper startup, which is a derogatory, because they don't see the hard work behind the scenes. What do you see that we don't see?
Yeah, well, so I think one of the most important things in building a business is creating technology that other people aren't able to recreate. And that's why from the very beginning, we have focused on proprietary data. How can we learn from all of our proprietary data in the marketplace of how well people are performing to make better predictions around what are the things that cause people to perform better in the future? And that's a really hard problem to solve, but we're making incredible headway and progress towards it.
That's a really data-oriented problem to solve. Connecting the dots with AI, causations, correlations, it's a big problem. What about you? What do you see?
Yeah, so I totally agree with Brendan's point about building technology that's hard for others to recreate. And when I think about Mercor, I think the two really, really interesting components of Mercor that make it really hard to recreate are, first, the network effects of the marketplace, right? So much like Uber or Airbnb, every additional candidate on the platform improves the experience for companies, and every additional company on the platform improves the experience for candidates. And then secondly is the performance data flywheel, right? Where, as Brendan mentioned, we have this really, really exciting data set of who's doing well at what job and what that even means. And then we can use that to make our models better and better over time.
In terms of models, how do you balance out one model? If I have to think about one model mastering hiring for healthcare, software engineering, manufacturing, small businesses, management, how do you balance one model having all of the skills, or different models for each?
Yeah, so there's sort of two parts of that. First is that what we've found is actually the important thing is that we focus on high volume hiring processes, less so than the specific industry, and that there's a fixed cost that we need to automate a certain interview process one time. And then we're able to use that for many different people that we would want to hire in that role. And so that's what we've leaned into. But I think the second part, and tied to your question of what is the interaction between learning what makes a good doctor versus a good lawyer versus a good software engineer, is that there's transfer learning across all of them, right? Like, the attributes that make a great doctor actually have a lot of similarities to the attributes that make a great software engineer. You want people that are passionate about what they're doing, people that are deep domain experts in the things that are relevant to the job, right? And all these different nuanced things contextual to every role. And so that's why we believe the world is going to trend towards this one unified model that gains a foundational understanding of what causes someone to perform well in a job, and facilitates all of the matching around labor in the economy.
So it's a monolith approach. Like one model can understand everything perfectly.
And the idea is that there are all these different learnings based on different archetypes of people that you place on a role, right? And you can combine all of those learnings into a unified model. So, for example, a consultant. A really, really important part about being a great consultant is being really good at communicating and having a lot of charisma. So our model learns that for that project. And then for software engineers, it's really, really important to be technically at the bar. And we can have that optimal archetype for software engineers and stuff like that. And through collecting all these learnings across every role, financial analysts, consultants, software engineers, doctors, lawyers, we can build that generalizable model to understand exactly who should be doing what job and why.
So you think scaling laws still hold? As models get bigger and bigger, they continue to go better?
Yes.
Because like ChatGPT's 4.5, GPT 4.5 model got hate for becoming better, but, more expensive. So, but we can see, you see a trajectory that models still becoming bigger and better.
Well, I think one important caveat is that the data needs to be relevant and sort of in distribution for the tasks that you're trying to solve. And that if I get really good at solving some sort of problem like writing jokes, it's probably not as applicable to how well I'm assessing doctors. But if I get really good at assessing software engineers and like what are all the characteristics that make a software engineer great at their job, right? They're passionate about what they're doing, they're good communicators, they have the technical skills, etc. Maybe even wrote certain papers and relevant topics and have GitHub repositories that are relevant. A lot of the learnings and how you would go about doing that are very transferable to the learnings that you would have in evaluating a great doctor. And so long as sort of the nature of the problem is similar enough, there's an immense amount of benefit to having all of that within the same model.
And you guys mentioned for software engineers, you have the data not just till a software engineer is hired, but also after software engineer is hired. And what does the incentive companies have to give you that data of that engineer, if the engineer hired through Mercor is performing well or not?
Yeah, so, the interesting thing is we have this data on how people do on their interviews as well as what their backgrounds look like from things like their resume. And you're right in saying that we also get the data back from customers and how people actually perform at the job. One thing that we found is that customers are really, really excited to give us this data because we've been able to demonstrate that getting more and more of it makes us much better at placing the next person for their role. So it's actually a very mutually kind of beneficial relationship where as we get more performance data, we're able to make our models better, and then we're able to make their next hire that much better.
For humanity, adjusting to any kind of change is really difficult. And you're not just making engineers, applicants change how they interview, but also companies change how they want to hire. And right now, if I want to think about myself, I used to Google a lot. Then I started using ChatGPT. It took me 1 month to change my habit. And how do you convince anyone to change their habits, especially in this field?
One mental model for it is that similar to how you would want to give feedback to a recruiter that you're working with, how well the candidates that they're proposing end up doing on the job so that they can calibrate, so that they can make better decisions, right? Like you want to tell them, like, here are the characteristics of resumes on candidates that are performing well, or here are the characteristics on interviews. Ideally, they're figuring out a lot of that stuff for you. And in the same way, our customers want to collaborate with us. They want to tell us, like, what are the things that are causing people to perform well? What are the metrics that they're looking at so that we can better deliver results for them and optimize for the things that they care about?
So I think it's also a Silicon Valley plus point. Here people are more likely to change. People anywhere other than Silicon Valley to change the way they work, it's going to be 10x harder. Do you agree? Because it sounds really easy. You guys could convince your customers to just change their hiring habits.
I think it's a matter of speed, right? Like a lot of the companies in Silicon Valley tend to move faster. They tend to be early adopters and sort of a leading indicator on the things that the rest of the economy is doing. But we still are starting to see a lot of this happening in the rest of the Fortune 500 and all of the small businesses around the world where they're interested in how can they make their businesses more efficient, right? How can they solve what's one of the largest pain points for most companies, which is hiring, and apply AI throughout all of their workflows.
And in this process, what does scare you the most, if there's anything? Like, some people talk about being scared about competition with China, Europe? Or is there something that scares you? Is it competition with maybe LinkedIn if they launch this?
Well, it's funny. I feel like LinkedIn is the worst product I use every day.
Really?
And that, which is an interesting dichotomy, right? Less so worried about LinkedIn. I think it's more so that there's going to be a lot of job displacement, as you alluded to, that happens from AI, right? And it's going to be difficult for a period of time for a lot of people. One of the things I'm really excited about on the other side of that is like, how do we find the next jobs for those people? How do we understand that as the economy starts to become more efficient and automate certain things, like what are the other places that people can contribute and we can create more opportunities for people? Because I think over the next 5 years, that's going to be the most important problem, not just in technology, but also politically.
100%. Now, the fascinating movement of Mercor, 3 million seed fund, 1 million ARR without raising a single dollar, and then 30 million Series A and 100 million at 2 billion valuation at 5% dilution. This is fascinating and supported by Thiel,
Jack Dorsey,
Jack Dorsey, and
Benchmark.
Yep. What is the secret sauce around it?
Yeah, so I would say there's two things. So the first thing is building a product that people really want. And when we really, really knew that people wanted our product, the dominoes started falling very, very quickly. And the 50% month over month was more of a side effect than like an end goal that we were optimizing for. And then the second thing is having a strong team to sort of chase the vision with. So, for us, it was the fact that Brendan, Surya, and I had known each other for a really, really long time, right? I'd known Surya since I was 10 years old. I met Brendan when I was in 9th grade in high school, and we traveled together, worked together so closely. So it really wouldn't have been possible if we didn't have the right team.
And how do you continue to attract talent? Like you said, you have a talented team now, which you met coincidentally, but attracting talent throughout this journey, like a small team of 30 plus now, right? Probably 30. It was 30 when you hit 70 million ARR, right? And
yeah, I will caveat that was our US team. And then we also have our team in India as well, which is the team doing a lot of the work and building out the product. So
I see. So with a small team, it's also harder to attract talent the whole time. I remember you mentioned the most difficult part is not to hire, it's to adjust with more people. Scaling is difficult with more people than with more revenue.
Yeah.
So how do you continue to attract talent?
Yeah. So it's interesting because as you mentioned, we can't scale our team 50% month over month, like we're scaling revenue. I think the key thing for Brendan, Surya, and I is attracting people who are naturally really, really excited by the mission to create 100 billion jobs. And oftentimes people who are really, really excited by the mission will move mountains to move the company forward and care a ton. So those are the people that we want to work with and are the people that we have at Mercor today.
How do you figure out that? What would be the one question you definitely ask to a person who can move the mountains?
It's interesting. Everyone has their own questions. Brendan, I'm curious yours.
One thing I love asking people about is the timeline that it would take them to build a certain project, because you can see a lot about how they think about that and approach that, right? Are they someone who's like thinking about all the reasons that it would go slowly or take forever? Or are they someone who's in the mindset of like, how do we move fast and break things? How do we get to the prototype and iterate quickly to find the thing that users actually want and delivers value? And so seeing a lot of their, less so the end answer and more so the mindset and how they approach problems can be really informative on the kind of people we want to hire and this thing we talk about of hiring people with a can-do attitude.
Parkinson's rules, right? Like it takes as much time as much you give it to a problem. For example, Elon Musk building the biggest GPU cluster in just 3 months. It shocked everyone in the AI industry because he planned 3 months and it actually took 3 months.
I was just going to say, for me, it's sort of like a spin-off of the Brian Chesky question, which is, if you had 5 years left to live, would you still join Mercor? And depending on people's answers, you sort of know whether they're really bought into the mission.
You guys hit 100 million ARR. It's one of the fastest company in the world, faster than Google and Facebook. In a labor market, solving a labor market problem, do you think it's the biggest problem to solve right now? It's a big problem in a bigger market, or you think it's a relatively smaller problem that someone can target?
Absolutely. I think, and Adarsh, feel free to chime in here, but I feel like what people do every day is the most important problem in their lives, right? Not just from an economic standpoint of being able to, progress throughout their careers and make a living, but also in terms of what they're passionate about and finding the things that are really fulfilling to them. And so if we accomplish that, that is really what's in line with the end goal and mission of Mercor.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that labor markets are the largest market in the entire world, right? So by definition, it's almost chasing kind of like the largest problem that exists. And the thing that interests me the most about labor markets is that despite being the largest market in the world, they're the most inefficient, right? Everything is super fragmented, where every candidate applies to thousands of different opportunities. And on the other side, companies consider thousands of different candidates in super manual, outdated processes. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is that there's just this huge information asymmetry problem, right? Where it's really, really hard to know if you're making the right hire or why you're making the right hire or what to even look for. So it was a combination of all of those things that made us excited to go after the largest problem in the world.
Thiel Fellowship, how does it work? Like how hard it is to get for anyone? So anyone young wanted to go to college right now, what would be the advice? To target the Thiel Fellowship to drop out of college or just to stay in college? It's a tough question.
Yeah. So I think my take on college is people underestimate two things. One is you absorb 90% of the brand value when you get in, not by getting the degree. And second thing is people underestimate how much value you absorb in 2 years as opposed to 4 years. So for me, like the huge chunk of personal development happened in those 2 years. And I personally really enjoyed those 2 years. As for the Thiel Fellowship specifically, for us, it was actually something that we got after we dropped out. So we were bootstrapped the business, dropped out, moved to New York, moved back to SF, raised our seed round, and then afterwards got the Thiel Fellowship. So I would recommend dropping out if it's the right answer for you, and the fellowships and stuff happen afterwards.
One thing going off of that is I think oftentimes people optimize too much for like the shiny things like winning the award or getting a good valuation and too little on the actual substance of what you're doing. And if you just focus on moving really quickly and creating a lot of value for your customers and your users, that's usually the thing that ends up translating to all of the prizes or exciting things happening later on anyways.
A lot of my audience in India and America right now watching, like they are obsessed with tech jobs. It's their dream. And like for doctor, when they save life, they feel like blessed. For you, do you get the same feeling? Like you're impacting at the same level to a human being by getting a tech job, especially when they're sitting at their home now. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, it feels really good. I mean, actually going back to like the origin story was that my co-founders and I were working on like a dev shop where we would build projects, and we partnered with the Code Club at IIT Kharagpur and a couple of the other IITs to hire engineers. And we were amazed that there were so many phenomenally talented people, probably just like many of the viewers in your audience, that weren't getting many of the opportunities that they deserved. And so much of the motivation behind Mercor came not just from this like obsession with all that AI was possible with AI, but also just this feeling like that these people all around the world deserve opportunities, and we can make that market dramatically more efficient through using LLMs to build a global unified labor market.
What's a philosophical take on that? Do you feel like you get the same feeling like a doctor?
Yeah, it's hard to compare it to a doctor because I've never been in the medical profession, but I would say that it's one of the most rewarding parts of working on Mercor, right? Where there are so many exceptional people, and giving them opportunities that genuinely change their lives is like one of the most rewarding things that I can do. I remember, one time that it really, really hit for me is I was watching this like testimonial video of a linguist who was struggling to find a job, was able to work remotely, get paid really, really well, and do their dream job, which is writing, right? Writing funny pieces, writing, nonfiction stories and stuff like that. And they said that Mercor changed their life. And the thing that excites me the most is not just that story, but replicating that story millions and billions of times over.
Wow.
Because that's now possible with software.
Is that something that makes you most happy? Like this story itself gives me goosebumps. Like, changing lives, especially in those countries who can never imagine.
Yeah, it's a huge part of why I do it.
And from outside, it seems really easy. I want to understand what are the highest and the lowest point of building Mercor.
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? There's like different obstacles and challenges in different phases of building the company. I remember back when it was just Brendan, Surrey, and I, and we were just getting the product off the ground. We had some reliability issues with the product. So what I did is I got an Apple Watch and I configured the Apple Watch to buzz me every time there was a spike in support tickets. So for 2 weeks straight, I would just keep getting buzzed at 3 a.m. in the middle of the night, and I'd get up, go fix it, go back to sleep, get buzzed, go back and fix it, go back to sleep. So I remember that was one particularly challenging time. And now, obviously, during the period of rapid growth, there's a lot of things that you have to keep up with because things are moving very quickly.
How about you? Like, this story resonates with me a lot. I came to the Bay Area. I was thinking I got 4 hours of sleep, and then I met 3 founders. They said they didn't sleep for 2 nights. I'm like, you can always find more hardworking people as you walk in Bay Area.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our entire company works like crazy. Like our office hours as marketed are 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. And the reason is that if you look at all of the legendary companies and the early cultures of them, like you mentioned, Google and Meta, those companies just have these like maniacally intense, hardworking cultures where it attracts a specific kind of person, right? Like a person that is bought in to the mission of the company and the impact that it can have in the world, rather than how much is their hourly rate when they sort of like think backwards and doing all this optimization around how they can spend less time at work.
So if a student gets into a big school like Harvard, GeorgeTown, is that you guys really recommend dropping out because the value of that college degree is already same once you get in? So after the first month, the value of that brand name is there. You would recommend them to drop out and get Thiel scholarship. Is that really true?
I would say it's very dependent on the person, but the 2 things I really believe are you absorb most of the signaling value of college once you get in, and secondly is there's huge diminishing returns, right? I grew so much just as a person in the first year of living by myself on the East Coast, growing up in the Bay Area. Second year, I learned the most kind of content-wise. And from there, if I had stayed, it just sort of would have tapered off. And for me, it was the right decision. Not just because my learnings were tapering off, but because I had the opportunity to give it my all with my best friends to work on Mercor.
A lot of the audience I have are software engineers. How can they leverage Mercor AI with the best possible way? Like prepare the best way and get hired?
Yeah, so I would recommend creating an account on our platform. We have tons of opportunities for people to practice skills in their interviews. One thing that we recently rolled out is our mock interviews feature. So if you want to practice taking verbal technical screens, system designs, algorithms, and stuff like that, you can do that on mercor.com/interviews. And then the second thing is you should totally apply to jobs through our platform. So once you create an account, upload your resume, you will be able to apply to tons of different jobs that suit your background that are hiring hundreds, if not thousands of people.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adarsh. Thank you so much, Brendan. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for having me. It was a dream come true for me too. And I wish you all the best.
Fantastic. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sweet.
Guys. Of course.
Thank you so much. Totally. Now let's get to understand Mercor AI. How can someone get started with Mercor AI? And if they want to get a job, or if there's a company in the US or anywhere in the world and they want to hire using Mercor, how can they go about it?
Absolutely. So if you're an applicant, you can go to work.mercor.com where you can upload your resume. You can talk about the different career paths that you want to go down. And then you can apply to jobs. You can also take mock interviews where you can practice for all of these interviews that we're seeing at top Silicon Valley companies, get feedback on how you're doing. And all of that goes in the experience. If you're a company, you can go to the team platform, team.mercor.com, and create jobs, describe the kinds of candidates that you're looking for, and then we'll run the fully automated process of how we reach out to candidates, how we interview them, and ultimately decide who should be hired.
You now not just have to click once on your Mercor platform. You don't have to click on multiple buttons applying to different jobs. You match for them. So at one place with limited clicks, you apply for thousands of jobs.
Totally. But it's not just simplifying the resume upload, right? Because like that's actually the easy part of an application process. The painful part is having to do 100 different DSA screens, right? And then having to do all of the different down funnel interviews, because all of that is decentralized, right? All of that is individual company processes. But what we believe is that it's going to trend towards something that is centralized, where everyone does all of their interviews with one platform that all companies hire from, right? So that you don't have to do all of this redundant work in every application process.
Got it.